All right, so this is episode 9 of the Play One podcast, and we're here today with James Tomlinson. James, tell us a little bit about yourself, bro.
Guys, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I feel very honoured to be here, especially in the early days before you're all too famous. Man, look, just from me, I guess we know each other through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from Lachlan Giles and Thiago Stefanuti, training at Absolute MMA in St Kilda. I also teach out at King's MMA in Bayswater. I'm the head Jiu-Jitsu coach there. I also have a black belt in Taekwondo. I guess I'm a hardcore, dedicated trainer. I've been a personal trainer since I was 18 years old. So I've done personal training and coaching about as long as I've done anything. And I've pretty much been living in the gym since I was 12 years old. So I love to lift weights. I love to be active. I love to do fitness things. But I guess being nerdy, I study. So my superpower is my learning powers. And so I apply that when I was younger, I wasn't very athletic and I got picked on because I was a nerd. But then what I did was I took my ability to learn and applied it to everything. I applied it to the cool kids. I studied the cool kids, the funny kids. I studied the funny kids. I applied it to weightlifting, fitness, martial arts, everything, and it changed my whole life. So I was able to leverage my ability to learn to be who I am now. And I feel like a big part of what I do is I read, I'm a voracious reader, audiobooks, podcasts, the whole deal. We're all very much on that similar, player one mindset, which is, taking in as much information as you can and then utilizing it. And so I think for me, what I like to do now is share as much as I've learned with people around me and then get their feedback and learn from them. I'm like really addicted to learning. So, yeah, man, I just manifest all those things as much as I can. So, I wanted to reach more people. So we started Bulletproof for BJJ, which is how to get fitter and stronger and also more flexible for jiu-jitsu, because I found that just working one-on-one with personal training wasn't enough. And that's been great. We've been able to reach hundreds, thousands of people now through that to help them get injury-free and all of that. And then also the young child in me that likes to play decided to make a game. So, that's the nerd manifesting. Just like, the game of jiu-jitsu is incredible, right? So I thought to myself, how come someone hasn't made a jiu-jitsu game? This is like years ago. And I understand jiu-jitsu is quite young, but making a game is actually really hard. And I didn't even understand that at the time. But I was like, I'll just make a game. And here we are, 4.5 years later, still working on it. But, so that has been an amazing path for me too. But every time, all the time, I'm trying to share martial arts and also just share learning. So that's my main thing in life is, just getting out there, having good conversations like with gentlemen like yourselves and just sharing the good information.
That's awesome, bro. Something that you touched on there that I made a point of about learning, and that's because super, super important, bro. The more we learn, and I guess like we realize it more and more every day, the more we learn, the more opportunities for growth that we have. And then the reason that stuck with me, something else I've been thinking about recently that Josh and I both have come across, Ray Dalio. He's an investor with a bunch of great insights. And one of his things is to be radically open-minded. And he talks about how being radically open-minded, and if you tie that to learning as well, because you then take off the limits that you might impose on your learning by allowing your mind to take in absolutely everything, and then you make sense of it and figure out if it's something you want to apply, or it's something that you might want to discard or hold on to for later. But how did learning play a role? Because you said you had to really like adopt that as one of your traits. How do you think that like played a role in you going about and creating a bunch of different businesses, games, getting belts in different martial arts?
Oh man, I think once they, not to say that I'll keep it very honest, my achievements in jiu-jitsu are nothing to speak of competitively, even though I'm a competitor, no one knows me for my competitions. I guess people know me because I love training, and training is a big part of my life as a habit. But in terms of learning, I guess that's the thing that people don't see. How much I read and how much I write and how much I just try and channel the energy of my brain. And I guess it stems from being a young kid, and I wasn't particularly athletic, and my parents didn't really encourage me to play sport, and essentially just said, if you study, then you'll be successful. But this wasn't true. I could see it all around me. Kids who are better at talking and kids who are better at kind of kissing up to the teacher and kind of, I guess, using networking skills would do better than me. And it didn't matter how smart I was if I couldn't relate the information in my mind. So what I did was I'm like, okay, I can see it's not working for me. And it took me a long time to really work out about EQ and social dynamics and all these things. But then when I started learning about it, I'm like, oh, this information applied means my life is easier. And in the same way with jiu-jitsu, right? It's like when you first learn that choke defense and then someone goes to choke you and then you apply that knowledge in real time, you don't get choked. You're like, yes, this works. Yeah. And that's very stimulating, right? Same thing with any martial arts technique. It changes the way you think, subsequently changes the way you move, and then it also changes the way you're perceived. So big thing for me was realizing that being able to take knowledge and apply it changed the way my life was. And so I'm constantly trying to take in as much information relevant to what I'm working on. Because I'm similar to you, Giz, with the distraction thing, right? Like finding it very hard to just sit in one place and focus on one thing. Like, I'll be honest, I was probably an ADHD kid, but not diagnosed, right? Yeah. And the hardest thing for me is to bring my energy to one place and actually do something constructive with it. I'm always starting a million things. Like I do one thing, I get bored of it real quick, and I do a new. I'm like, oh, okay, I've made a game. Let's write a book. Oh, I've written a book. Let's write a TV show. Let's now, like a million things. Yeah. So essentially, I had to also process a lot of information about focusing and mindfulness and meditation because my brain goes a million miles an hour. But each time it came back to understanding a body of knowledge, extracting what was useful. The same thing, Bruce Lee, absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is entirely your own, right? Same deal. Each time I realized I had to filter the information, take it in, filter it, and then apply it. Because the thing that frustrates me is theoretical ideas without application. Yeah. Which, for me, it's cool for some people, but I'm a very practical person. I want to take that information, I want to go use it like right now.
It's like if you want to just compile data and get information, I think that's a job for some people, but I think the biggest impact is when you start to apply it and you start to take what you learn and then try to really apply it and then just continue that.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's pretty much useless. Have you ever heard that saying or principle of just-in-time information versus just-in-case information?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely.
I spoke on that. I think that's a lot of people's problem is that they'll try and read something because maybe they were recommended it's a cool book, but that's sort of like a just-in-case information. And then I guess developing a business, I would use just-in-time. Like I'm going to read a business book now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think something that I've definitely learned is being cool or being perceived as being cool it's almost a crutch. It's like being born into money. It's not necessarily that helpful because you've got it there. And so you kind of rely on it. So then when it's not there, you're kind of stuffed. I was never cool. I never really had money and I never fit in. So I never really cared about those things. Yeah. So then when I got to the heart of it and I realized that being cool was about not actually caring what other people thought and just doing your thing, then I realized actually I was like the coolest person there because I didn't really give a,
That's funny. I didn't care. Realize that and you go, well, if you just do your own thing, do whatever you want, and that's your uniqueness. It becomes your thing. And I think it's like, I guess there are some things maybe that are universally cool, but there's never any good benefit in looking at other things and being like, that's really cool. Instead, you should look at it and be like, that's really valuable. Maybe I want to try that. That's what I try to take when I choose what I want to take from other people. I'll be like, that's really valuable what they do. Let me add that, not based on coolness.
I think I see coolness as like a social manipulation. Because you're also being told how to be popular.
Yeah.
Get these sneakers, buy this brand, rock this car, get this money. And that actually has nothing to do with your self-expression. None of it.
Yeah.
And I think as a general thing within the culture, because I have enough perspective now to think about what is culture, I don't want to compete anymore. Now, that's not because I'm not competitive. It's because competing as a mindset is a zero-sum game. There's a quote, I'm trying to think about who it comes from. It's from a fairly famous founder, and it says, competition is for losers. Like, don't get me wrong, I love to compete because my highest aspiration was to be a champion in anything I did, to be the best. Yeah. Being the best was like my sole goal. But the thing is, I think you can look at it and see things for what they are and realize that creativity and collaboration is so powerful. Yeah. If you want to make a change, if you want to put a dent on reality, if you want to change culture, you got to work with others. You got to create, you got to put things in the world, like you guys making this podcast, right? So I made a deal with myself when I turned 35 that I was going to stop being a competitor and start being a creator, but apply my competitive energy to generating things.
That's a great combination. Yeah.
To put something in the world.
Yeah. Because, I think that competition can be not misused, but there's people only see competition as applying it in one area. Like you jump into something, the competition is you have to try and win. But if you take the essence of competition and you apply it elsewhere, you get big results. Like if you make your competition not to try and win and be the best out of everyone, it's just, I want to be absolutely the best I can be, or do the most that I can do, or or get as close to my full potential as possible. Along the way, you're going to get all those wins and the losses and everything else and part of it. That's really good. I like that taking that competitiveness and applying it to creativity.
And here's the thing, like, I think my life has benefited, number one, from martial arts being one of the main focuses, and having competitions to aim for. And when, it's stated a lot that generally people's best outcomes occur when they let go of the outcome. They release expectation, they relax, and they just do the thing, They flow and they're just doing the thing, and that's how they have success. Imagining $1 million doesn't make $1 million, right? But if you do the processes and you enjoy the process of the things and the habits that lead to making and keeping money, then over time you will get that money long term. So the thing for me was, I realized when I was looking at the podium at Worlds, right? I was looking, because I wanted to be a world champion in jiu-jitsu. I was looking at the podium at Worlds, and there's a great Australian jiu-jitsu competitor called Rod Costa, and he's just opened his own academy just before, all these things happening in the world right now. That guy is possibly, I would say, one of the most medaled Australian jiu-jitsu athletes of all time. That guy's got bronze at every belt. He's got silver at almost every belt. He trains under Philippe Pena. He's from Perth. Wow. Rod Costa, shout out, respect.
Yeah, I've seen him compete. He's a machine.
He's a machine, right? And also, I remember a famous time when he guillotined Ben Hodgkinson unconscious. Great day. Great day. But here's the deal, right? Rod Costa could easily be number one. Like, if you can be third in the world, you can be number one. It doesn't mean that you did it on the day, but if you can do those processes and get there, you can be number one. But no one remembers who came third. Like, don't get me wrong, you've got to risk it for the biscuit. You've got to go through that process to be number one if you want to define yourself as a champion. But I'm telling you right now, like, who's the world lightweight champion in 1999? You can't tell me, because only really what it means to that person matters. At the end of the day, what it means to you is almost as important as anything else. it's proving it to yourself.
That's a big part.
And what I realized for myself in terms of not being too harsh on myself and being so self-critical all the time, I can be my best without having to prove it to everyone. I've just got to prove it to me. And that was a major change.
Yeah, like when you have that little perspective shift, I think you're in a much better place, and you get a lot more done, a lot better. When you have the right reasons behind it. Are there any tips you have for competition and things you've learned over the time of competition? Even though you've taken competitiveness and applied it in a new way, is there anything you've learned through competing that you feel are little, like perhaps advice on, okay, in order to achieve in competition, like these things will help, like such as learning, refining?
Yeah, I think, look, you can analyze competition fairly easily in terms of it being a construct to take the mystery out of it, but you have to be well informed. So, for example, I feel like a lot of Australians who want to compete in, say, the IBJJF format are not possibly training adequately because they don't know what's going on internationally. Now, obviously, this has evolved over time. We have plenty of people who've podiumed and medaled at Worlds, but you've got to look at that and go, the majority of them train with an international team. In the same way, our great cyclists, great soccer players, great everything, because we're a huge island with a tiny population, even though we have very high standards, when you go to Brazil or you go to the US, you go to Atos, you go to Alliance, you go to whichever big team, and you stand on the mat and there's 80 black belts, you're just like, it's a totally different story. And then when you realize they've got a guy who's been on his blue belt for 4 years and they're just keeping him there to kill you, and you're like, well, I'm the best in Australia. It's almost unfair, but you have to know the world standard is much harsher than possibly even your own standard. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but literally the times when I improved my jiu-jitsu to be the best I could be, I went and lived in Brazil. I trained with the best team. I trained 3 times a day. I just did absolute immersion. Like, you know, when they talk about learning languages, how you've got to go to the country and speak the local language. I observed the behaviors of the best people in the world. I also observed some failures in what they did in terms of not recovering right and stuff like that, but just developing a proper mentality for what it took to be a world champion. And it's essentially, it is an absolute dedication.
Yeah.
And I think even though we have great things about our lives in Australia, because we're a first world country and we have a lot of options, this also is a weakness. Exactly. Because we have other options, we will choose them. Yeah. And the mentality you must have is, I'm going to do this thing until that is who I am. Like, I must do it absolutely.
And if you really dedicate yourself to it, I think people that have done that in any field will find that you become the goal, kind of, in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, which is interesting.
That is cool, actually.
In regards to yourself now, like a little activity I've been keen on seeing how it would play out. If you could picture or see yourself as a character, okay, with the player one theory, see yourself as a character in the game of life. So life is a game, and then there's JT and his character. If you were to give us a little bit of a character breakdown, what qualities, strengths, perhaps areas where you want to improve, could you highlight for us?
I feel when I analyze myself, I have a lot of energy. So my turbo would be pretty good, you know. The only problem is I think the steering might be a little bit out, you know, like there's an inefficiency there. You hit the turbo and you end up running into a wall like a sim. And then you got to, like, jump too far.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Having a lot of energy to apply to other areas, it means you can also apply them to maybe some of those dead ends, and then you still have plenty more to come back And as long as you apply the principle of learning that you've been applying your whole life, each time you run into another little like dead end or whatnot, you just get more information and you download that into your character and you go on to the next area and the next area. And I'm sure there's things with Bulletproof for BJJ and Jugo that you're happy with that are a culmination of previous efforts in other areas that you've learned. Yeah.
I think if you think about a lot of the games that people play now, the maps are massive, right? It doesn't matter if you're into Red Dead Redemption or if you love The Witcher or whichever like great game, the map is massive. And you can choose to run it however you want, right? So for me, what I realize is I don't need anyone's permission to do or be anything. I just go and do it. Like no one said to me, "Oh, hang on, you're not a game designer. You didn't study game design." Well, actually, in truth, I have all the traits of a game designer. I'm a nerd. I grew up in the 90s. I love Ninja Turtles. Like, what? I can't make a game? Like, I draw.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, there is no, like, here's the thing. 200 years ago, there was no arts degree. You were an artist. You produced art up until a point that people valued it and then they paid you. You didn't make it and then expect a payment. You just made art because that was what you wanted to do. And your early artworks were probably crap. You know what I mean? But then eventually it was recognized that you are an artist. But here's the thing. If we take a person like Leonardo da Vinci, that guy, he was like the mega character. That guy was like an artist, an inventor, a writer. Like that guy had every superpower in the freaking book. And people look at that guy and go, "Oh, he's got talent." Well, here's my personal opinion, and not everyone's going to be cool with this. I don't believe in talent. I think talent is a myth. And for all of you guys out there who love Hyperfly as a brand, good for you. But you can teach heart. You learn everything. Yes, you learn in the womb, but you learn to walk. Like here's something I realized feeding my young friend's baby. You don't even know how to eat. Like he's there like trying to eat and I'm trying to get food in his mouth, but he hasn't even worked out how to get the food from the front of his mouth to the back of his mouth. He's just, man, the food's going everywhere. And I'm like, dude,
right.
You want to eat. You haven't even learned how to like get it from the front of the mouth to your back. Like it was hilarious, right?
Yeah.
We learn everything. If you can enhance your ability to learn and focus it, you're going to win. And you need no one's permission. And that's what I've done. I didn't ask anyone's permission to be an authority on anything. I just learned the most I can about it. And if that happens to be relatable, then hopefully you can learn from it too and we can share it.
And isn't that so much more fun? Isn't that such a, if you can choose to live in that way and you don't wait for anyone's permission, you're going to experience so much more, because people will hold themselves back on so many things just by thinking that's not my place. But whose place is it anyway? You just create that. If you want it, you just go out and you start.
Like what makes you qualified in the first place? You know
Once you're there,
just that guy. Don't get me wrong. Neurosurgeons need qualifications.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not talking about that. But what I'm saying is, like, I'll give you an example. So my sister is, my middle sister, Jenny, a very creative person. She was playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And at the time, she was a bit unwell. She couldn't leave the house. And so instead of getting in a ship, like you get on the ship and then load screen, it takes you to the next. She would literally jump off a cliff and just start swimming to the next island. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, well, whatever. I might like fight a shark or find some treasure or,
exactly.
You know, she was just doing whatever she wanted because you can.
Yeah.
You don't have to get on the ship and take the main road.
Yeah.
That's nonsense. Like for me, I didn't go to university, right? My mum has been telling me to get a professional job my whole life, but I've somehow been able to have a career anyway.
Yeah. See?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. It's a strength and a weakness, right? I don't have the best hearing. Like my ears are a bit cauliflowered. I listen to too much loud music as an angry teenager. right? But I don't listen to anyone. Like, I don't. Like, but here's the thing, right? I said this to somebody. This is my power. I'm deaf, but I'm also like headstrong. So you can't distract me because I'm doing whatever I'm doing, right? I said this to somebody. I said, it is much better to fail by your own mistakes than to succeed by the advice of others. And she said, that just sounds like narcissism. I'm like, no, you're missing the point. When you fail off your own initiative, you learn. When you succeed off the advice of others, you learn nothing. And your success is not attributable to yourself.
But sometimes advice can be a gift. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Doing both,
definitely.
Being open to it is where I try to like.
Definitely. But like I said, it's a strength and a weakness, right? Like if I was running towards a cliff and you're like, hey, there's a cliff, I'll be like, what? Ah! You know, that's my character. That's my character in the game of life, bro.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but and I think that's one of the biggest points and almost like the first step, if you were to take on this mindset, is knowing who your character is, knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses and being like, okay, is this, how should I operate from here? Is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? And if it is, like, what am I going to do about it from there? But you have to self-analyze. What's the word?
Self-analyze.
Yeah. You have to analyze yourself first. And that's really strong that you know that, you know what I mean?
And that total immersion that you talked about, again, it's like if there's something you're really passionate about and you decide, hey, I'm going to go down this pathway here. I'm going to take this side quest and see where it takes me. If you really fully commit and put all that passion and energy into it, along the way, something will give. And it'll either tell you it's the wrong place, which then tells you where you should go next, or you'll find out that this is the right path to go down and you'll just keep going down. The key is to just jump in, bro. That's such a big thing. And with everyone that I see, that makes me really happy when I see like people like yourself or anyone else doing their own thing and going out there. I'm starting to see we both are more and more. They just share a similar mindset in certain areas of, you know what, if I want this, I'm gonna go and try and get it. That's part one. Otherwise, you're gonna live your whole life never ever getting anything.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that people don't really. There's a great quote from a military strategist. I think he's considered to be the greatest military strategist in American history. I've forgotten the gentleman's name. It was mentioned in Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way. Now, a lot of my personal philosophy comes from Stoicism. And, you know, Ryan Holiday is definitely, I would say he's probably one of the most authoritative voices on Stoicism in contemporary writing, right? Like that's where a lot of his writing comes from. He's the mind behind the Daily Stoic. Anyway, he talked about this guy, and this guy used to train generals for the US Army. He's a brilliant guy. And he said, you're either going to do something or you're going to be someone. Now, are you here to get something done, or you're here to be seen and be someone? My biggest internal conflict right now is my obligation to social media. Because I do understand that it is an important communication tool. But in truth, it occupies too much of my insecurities and distractions in my mind. It doesn't make me more productive. You know, it's that being somebody, which in truth is an illusion, right? You are what you do every day. So if I tell you I'm a writer and I tweet about it, I'm not really a writer, I'm a tweet writer. Like there's a very famous thing about all these writers tweeting about how they're getting their manuscript done.
Yeah.
But why are you tweeting about it, son? Like just get it done and then publish. Like what are you doing? Same thing. Like I took a week off posting on my story because I actually don't want to share my first walk in the morning with you guys. That's my moment for me. Even though people have messaged me and said, man, I'm glad you're doing it. I appreciate it. I need that space in my mind to be able to function properly. As soon as I'm looking at my phone and I'm walking, I'm not actually appreciating or being mindful. Mm-hmm. In the same way, you know, my level of strength or my ability to move my body is only really relevant to what I'm trying to do with myself, even though you might look at it and be like, oh, that's nice, good for him, he's doing the good thing. Having to communicate my process to people is not what I'm about, even though they say it's important, and let people know what you're working on and stuff like that. I just want to do the thing, man. I just want to take action and change my life up. I want to get to the other side of this isolation and be like, I wrote a book. I developed the next issue of my game. I have distribution for my game in Japan, America, and Europe. Also, here's the comic book. Also, here's me guest starring in the new episode of, the remake of Friends. I don't know, like, I don't want to tell you about the process. You're just going to see the projects pop up. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I think like it's super important to know the value that lies in each thing we use. And the same is applied to social media. You have to know what it's there for, and you have to act accordingly. And everyone will have their own way of utilizing it and their own thoughts. I agree with much of what you say. With social media, I think that you have to accept it as a part of life today, especially if you run a business, own a business, or want to do anything to do with business, because it's a big conduit for marketing, for putting yourself out there. But you can't let it consume you, and you have to always know that if you're posting something, you're doing it to get the correct value out of it, and the value isn't for the sake of posting and being seen. Yeah. So it's either you're building up something for a reason, so you're building brand, you're building content, you're building awareness, building whatever is necessary for whatever the purpose is you've defined, and then that's it. And that's why I did something similar. Like a lot of my close friends, I have a separate Instagram account, which is private. I changed the name on it so people can't search it up and find it. And I keep that one super private. It's got less than 50 people on it. And what I would do is I'll post a lot of my training on my main to build up and assist in mixed martial arts. But then sometimes I won't. And I like to say to my friends when they talk to me about it, because some people will say, yeah, you should keep posting. Some people will say, don't post. I say, it doesn't matter, because either way I'm putting in the work.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, regardless of whether I've posted too much or not enough, the work, as you said, will always speak true. The work will speak true at the end of the day. And that's the main thing. That's so important.
Yeah, well, it's important realizing what the platform is for in the first place. You know what I mean? Like, you're either a consumer or you're a creator. It's as simple as that. And you got to label yourself, which one am I? And stick to that.
That's a great point there. You're either a consumer or creator. That makes sense.
Well, I feel that one of the biggest problems is that we are taught as a culture to consume. Do you know what I mean? Like, we are a consumer culture. How many people right now write books?
Yeah, not a lot.
Right?
It's a rare thing. That's the thing. It's only I want to read. What about putting it something out? Yeah.
How many people right now are shooting like docos or making like short films? Everybody's on Netflix. The need and the demand for content is there.
Even with coronavirus now, the content now with hyping up certain things in certain situations, you see people really diving into the consumption, and you see the big media industries taking advantage of it and putting out content. I'm sure you're looking at it the same way that we all are. We see it, and you just see the big headline. You know what it's there for. It's there to capture attention, get people to consume more information. The consumption is a big part of our culture. Yeah,
I feel like I understand marketing is one of the most important things in the world, right? You could have a terrible product, but if it's marketed exceptionally well, you will get consumers. It doesn't mean that your product will mean anything in 10 years' time.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So here's the deal. I feel like, me personally, in terms of how I'm looking at what I'm doing, I want to create something so that when I am no longer in the world, my contribution is meaningful. It will last. So it's irrelevant about whether I made it or not. It will still serve as a tool. It will still serve as something. This isn't about legacy. This is just about contribution.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Like what you mentioned about Stephen Hawking in his book.
Yeah, his last book that you read.
Yeah.
These questions, the big thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Stephen Hawking questions.
5 answers to big questions, something like that.
Yeah.
And pretty much, like, Josh brought it up to me, and he said that one of the main reasons he wrote the book was to leave something behind. And he said leaving something behind can be simple as writing a book, creating a game, starting a podcast, starting a program, and
or having kids,
and passing on the information.
Yeah,
that was one of the big precursors to starting the podcast, because I think you and I are very like-minded in this way, that we have so many things going through our head and ideas, and maybe things that I'm not too sure if people think about or not. I don't know if people think the same way. And I'm like, what if I was that one in a million that was the only one having this thought and no one else was having it, and I never said it? And then it's like, maybe I had one piece of the puzzle to someone else's. And if I never voiced one, then it's never going to get sold. I'm just holding that one piece of the 1,000-piece puzzle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once I put it out there,
it's a ripple effect.
It has that ripple effect. And then it can flow, you know, and we can make a difference if we have the courage to put it out there.
Yeah. I think the thing that I've realized, looking bigger picture, because I look at my life on a much more kind of larger scale, you know. I think about all the things that I'm doing now as to how it affects my life in 5 and 10 years. And that really informs what I do day to day. I mean, even though my goal is to be a better person on all levels, like how I interact with people, how I just behavior in general, being more sustainable, just being a good person, I still feel the need, like it's important to me. Contribution is a huge element of the meaning of my life. So therefore, all my actions lead towards, even if I die tomorrow, you can't see my room right now, but my walls are covered with butcher's paper with man, actually, I don't know if I should show you, but I've got like all the different things I'm trying to do this year, the planning for the expansion of the game, when I want my manuscript done, like all the plans, and I'm trying to get out what's in here and put it into reality, even if it's not finished, so that maybe if someone else comes along, they could pick it up and maybe iterate, do a variable, whatever. You know, because it's super short, guys. Like the game, as far as we see it within this context, within this simulation, it's not a particularly long time. So I try to think about the whole game, and I want to change the game. I don't just want to be a player in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I think that's so important. Like the mindset though, especially of that long-term mindset, and of realizing, look, in this game and in this single play that we have, there's not much time. So you're better off utilizing the time you have towards something truly, something that you're really passionate about, or towards something that you think is worth it. And if you just compare that to, if you just live in the short term and in the macro and the right now, then you can think, okay, look, maybe this is the right move. But if you zoom out and you go, look, I don't have that much time, but at the same time, I've got this much to work with. Okay, maybe I should start now putting the things in place that in the next 10, 15 years, I'll be really happy with.
Definitely.
Actually, I have a question for that, because when you just said that you have this bigger perspective, and you sort of zoomed out on your life in the grand scheme of things, and how you want to get everything out of your head in the process. What made you decide to do that in the first place? Did you have a?
I guess I'm possibly less insecure about it now than I was, but you know, I've always had a big fear of death, you know, mortality. But the thing is, I think that's because I felt I didn't have the power to execute or actualize my ideas, or I didn't have enough money, or I didn't have enough connections, or blah, 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 whatever. I didn't finish uni. I didn't, you know, blah, all the nonsense. Well, what I realize now is, like, my most valued possession, other than say like my black belt or my journal, like I have very few possessions I really value, is my memento mori coin. Remember that you will die. Remember you could leave life right now. And that's the thing. Samurais did it as well. You know, the Stoics did it. Samurais do it. Buddhists do it. Where, you know, your life will pass, right? And you know, not everybody's trying to shape and change the world. That's fine. You know, like having a family, being happy, being healthy, that's all most people want. And the thing is, I can see that it's not going to get any easier later. Like my ability to do anything right now is as easy as it's going to get. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I didn't think that when I was younger. When I was younger, I was like, oh, it'll be when I'm 30, like I'll have heaps of money and I'll be sorted and I can just do everything. No, this is actually not true at all. It's like, it's not going to be easier to start jiu-jitsu in 6 months' time. You need to start now. Like, don't go get fit and then come back and do jiu-jitsu. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's not getting any easier. So I said to myself, I got to just do this right now. Like, I can't put this off, because what I did was I changed my mindset about death. Even if I die, I can be happy saying that I tried my best today in the name of the bigger plan.
James, when you're talking about earlier on the papers you got on your wall and the planning, it reminded me of a skill that I really am working on at the moment. I've been working on for a few months, which is focus one, and tied to that is organization and planning. Because in terms of upgrading your character, so when I did my little analysis of my character, I realized quickly that a few things, because I have similar energy in terms of, I feel like I have a lot of energy to apply, but I think something that was holding me back was the lack of focus in the moment to these tasks. Like I can focus in training, but when you're focusing and sitting down and have to do something pen and paper or on a laptop, very easy to get distracted, number one. Number two, my organizational skills weren't there, and my planning skills were either non-existent or very, very poor. And I realized, okay, in order for me to move forward and better be able to action everything that I have in my head, I need to develop some organization. I need to develop some skills. So is organization something or planning something you had to work on to develop as you went along the process, or is it something, a trait you had early on? And how would you update your character?
I mean, look, for me, man, like I guess it was, my mum was always pushing me from a young age to be organized, because obviously it would make her life easier, right? I'm the eldest son of my family. I have two younger sisters. If I'm organized, then she doesn't have to worry about me. She can look after my sisters. And if I'm organized, I can organize my sisters for her. And that's delegation. That's like a management task, right? Now, I'm not going to say, I wasn't an organized, responsible kid, but definitely martial arts gave me discipline. And my mum said to me, look, if you lose your leg pads, like if you lose your mouth guard, I'm not going to buy you another one. You're not going to have them till Christmas, buddy. Yeah. So you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like, oh, I can just buy another one. I got to like learn to be responsible for my stuff. And I think probably coming from a position of having limited resources made me more resourceful. Like when you got plenty of everything, you don't really learn to manage it that well, because it doesn't matter.
Whereas it's like, it's not something you got to try and figure out how you want to get it. Yeah.
That's right. And for me, I was not organized, and I was like, right, I got to learn how to do this. And I think working out how you learn is super important. Yeah. And because when I went to uni, I mean, before I went to uni, I bunked out of uni. I only did about a year of uni anyway, but I was studying education. I already knew how I learned, and sitting in a lecture theater listening to someone talk wasn't how I learned. Like, how ironic is it that I have to learn how to teach people in a way that isn't appropriate for me to learn? What are you guys doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, it just shows you how archaic and impractical a lot of the institutions are around learning. Like with jiu-jitsu, I actually learn a lot from videos. I'm very audio visual. So watching jiu-jitsu matches and analysis on video is actually a great way for me to learn, but for someone else, that's maybe not appropriate. So what I would do is I would actually take notes, write them down, and I got this from drama class for memorizing scripts. I used to study drama. I would read it out, record it, and then listen to my own voice. So listening to your own voice encodes in more places in your brain than listening to the voice of someone else.
Yeah, right. That's something I've done recently with some affirmations and goals that I have. And every morning, it's been day 7 now that I've decided to do this every single morning. I used to do it sporadically, I've now been writing down my exact same affirmations, my 3 main short to medium term goals, and my overarching objective in life. And I've written them all down, and I've also recorded myself saying it, just mucking about with different techniques. I recorded myself saying it with some sort of different like alpha waves in the background, just to give myself a new thing. And I've been listening to it every morning. It's been a great, and I've been finding it hits a little bit different when it's your own voice.
Oh, it does.
Really hearing it like that.
Yeah, and also your own writing. So one of the major things for organization is journaling.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've been journaling for probably 3-4 years. They're really hard, right? I keep them all as well, so I can go back and kind of have a look at what I was saying to myself this time last year, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's your own conversation with yourself. The most important conversation you have is the conversation you have with yourself.
Yeah.
Because really, a lot of people care about what's going on outside of them. And the Stoic philosophy and the Stoic mindset is all about controlling your reasoned choice. And yes, within self-analysis, you need to be able to question yourself sometimes and say, maybe this thing that I'm doing is not working. Like, maybe this isn't as successful. What if, and this is like some Seinfeld stuff, what if I just did the opposite of what I'm doing right now? Like, George can't succeed, you know, he's talking to Jerry and he says, you know, like everything I do turns out wrong. And Jerry's like, why don't you just do the opposite of everything you're doing? And then he starts being wildly successful, you know, because if you don't have that tool of analysis, like I use journaling. Some people don't use journaling, right? Plenty of people have diaries, but I make sure I keep it separate from my phone, because your phone is associated with Twitter, Facebook, Tinder, fucking Messenger, you name it. Like it is a distraction machine. I use journaling to focus my mind. And so when we're talking about
method, sorry.
Well, yeah, definitely. So the structure that I stick to is like 3 points of gratitude, 3 points of focus. Like what am I grateful for? What am I doing? What am I happy about? What am I excited about? Like I have to kind of consciously, not force, but you know, when it's early in the morning, you're tired or maybe a muscle sore, whatever, you've got to get your brain going without drugs. You know, like I try not to have caffeine too early now, but like I will make myself excited about something. Like maybe I'm excited about my workout, or maybe I'm excited about meeting a new person, or whatever it might be, right? I put that there. And then the key part, which is actually something I learned from a friend of mine, is relating my actions back to my purpose. So 2 key actions and why. So number 1, create content for Bulletproof for BJJ. Number 2, send orders for Jugo to distributor. Why? I want to create content for Bulletproof for BJJ because it will help the BJJ community. Why am I going to send those orders to the distributor? Because I'm keeping my word to my customers. Because these are things that tap back into my principles. My actions stem from my principles. If you don't have principles, it doesn't matter where you are on the map. You know how when you go to the mall and there's the cross and it says, you are here. Well, it doesn't matter if you can't read a map, if you know, like, oh, you are here, but where am I in the fucking, like, how do I navigate the map?
Yeah.
Your principles tell you where you're going. Your principles tell you when to say no, you know?
Yeah.
And I've worked hard to cultivate a set of principles, and and being organized is one of those things, because people are counting on me to be organized, right? If you don't feel responsible for anyone else, just be responsible for yourself. Being organized helps. Being disorganized creates more waste and more problems for others than you realize. And I know a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking about others, but you being organized as a human, however you do it, is so powerful. And journaling and planning, like writing it down and mapping it out, like I'm very visual, is a key factor for me.
And it's a process. It's a process. Like I said, to bring it back to upgrading, I've been trying to, and I have been focusing on scheduling from like a few months in, probably like October last year was when I really had things in front of me, and I said I need to develop this skill, but it was on and off, and it got more regular And then after that, I realized, okay, I was packing my schedule too tight. I was still turning up late. So I had to go back to it. Why is that? I have the schedule. Okay, it's an internal problem. Okay, I need to make sure I allocate more time before I leave, have more of a buffer time in between tasks. And then you develop more things. Now I keep a list of my main objectives for the week when I schedule. My scheduling is on a Sunday, and I'll try and have that next to me so I know these are the things I want to accomplish. So that should be reflected in my schedule. And now my schedule actually looks less than what it is, because I'll maybe have only 2 blocks of work today where I'm going to sit down, and everyone has their own way of doing their work, but I'll sit down and engage in this subject and get this much done, or I'll engage in this topic and I'll try and do this. And I've turned to project planning to help me with that.
Yep.
But the skill just develops, and it's not going to be something that you do it. And maybe you had the same thing. It's not going to be like, all right, I've got a plan and now I'm going to be super organized. No. You got to actually learn it, and you got to refine the process to your own individual makeup. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I used to try and do too much as well, right? I still, my worst habit is like, in Star Wars when they're like, let's pull up the map, and they like press R2-D2 and it shows like a constellation. That is how many thoughts I have in a second. Like that, when my girlfriend says like, I'm sitting there staring into space, she's like, what are you thinking right now? It's literally 1,000 things. It's my mind is sometimes scary to me. I'm like, I'm mental. Like, what's something wrong with me that my brain is so all the time, like all the time. It is so hard for me to try and just bring it back to be productive, right? But this is what I would want to say to you. There's 2 key things here, and this relates not only to adaptability, but also to, you talk about navigating the playing field. And isolation life is the current playing field. There is a fantastic book called Essentialism by an author called Greg McKeown. For me, this is probably the most significant book that I've read in the last 6 or 7 years. Essentialism is all about doing less, but better. Quality, not quantity. And one of the key things he outlines in this is that the word priorite means singular, comes from Latin. The idea of priorities is a fallacy which we made up. It was like an adaptation of the word in like the 30s, which is nonsense, because we know that actually multitasking doesn't work. It's doing multiple things like averagely, right? Yeah. When you're doing the thing, just do the thing. Don't worry about everything else. Your ability to engage, do the thing, disengage, and then re-engage with something else, that's the real superpower, right? Yeah. That's focus, right? Yeah. And so what he talks about, there's another great book called Deep Work, which is all about how the greatest works in science, writing, discovery, and human history come from people putting themselves in isolation and just working on one thing. They literally, like, some of these guys would put themselves out in the middle of nowhere with no other option, so they would just write that book or just work on that formula, because, distractions have existed throughout time, but they exist more and more now than ever. But yet, we need innovation now more than ever. So I believe it is the strong, disciplined people who can say, and this isn't means if you don't have discipline, you're not strong. Like, it's like anything, right? You gradually become strong over time through working those muscles. But the discipline and the focus, isolation's awesome, dude. Like, I've written 165 pages of a book. Like, if this time hadn't come up, I probably wouldn't have written it, right? So I'm so determined to get this book written. Also, all my plans got messed up, right? I had to adapt because I was meant to go to the US to launch Jugo in the US on the 20th of March. But that's when everything hit, right? So then I've been thinking to myself, like, but what can I do from my office? Like, who can I email? Who can I video call? Who can I WhatsApp to still move the project forward? And just working off whatever limited resources I have, whether it's money, whatever. I have way more time, I have way less money, it doesn't matter. I'm pursuing many more avenues that I wouldn't have thought of had I had the luxury of just being able to go overseas, talk to the person in America or travel to Japan. And I've still been able to accomplish my goals, which is get an American distributor, get a Japanese distributor, and get the game to a point where I can put it all over the world. And that's just doing the best you can with what you have at the time. That's partly adaptability and not seeing things as a limitation, but just seeing them as a different way to play, and then just looking at this time as a blessing, man. Like, and this isn't even positive thinking. This is like, yeah, okay, right now, if you want to have a party and be social, this time's not great. But if you're just looking to get something done, this is the best time ever.
People are going to have more time right now than they will ever have in their entire life ever again. And when I heard someone mention that, and it stuck with me, and I said, wow, people will really have more time in isolation right now than they will ever have ever again in their life. So it's like, how do you want to get through it? As just another story that you're going to tell your friends and kids maybe a few generations later? Oh, mate, I lived through isolation. It was horrible. I was stuck every day, couldn't do anything. Or do you want to say, look, man, isolation came about. It wasn't the best, but I really had to push myself. And that's when I decided to do this thing. And then this became that. And then 3 years later, it's starting off that ripple effect. And you can drop that stone in that pond in isolation, and then maybe it'll turn into something else down the line.
Yeah, for sure.
I like that you said that, how you were saying that in a way it sort of messed up your plans, but then all these other ideas came across that you probably wouldn't have had this hadn't happened. You know what I mean? And I think that that's such an important thing for when people think about, they have some idea or some goal they want, but they're not quite sure how they're going to do it because they never take the first step. And it's like, no one sort of knows exactly how to do a thing. You know what I mean? Like if you take that first step, you're sort of going to come up with ideas that you didn't even know that were going to happen. But if you allow yourself that time to be on that process, you will formulate those ideas, but you have to take the first step. Yeah.
Definitely.
No, that's the way forward. Like when they say similar to the obstacle is the way, but the way forward is never going to be really in doubt. There's always another action. And that action is, even if you don't know, there's 3 things, which one do I do? Doing one of them will push you on a little, if there's a rung or a ladder, you're one rung ahead each single time. Just got to continue to act. And along the way, of course, you want to learn more about your playing field, like you mentioned. You want to upgrade yourself. You want to employ that player one mentality. And along the way, things should get easier. And if not, that's not the point of the game anyway.
Yeah, definitely, man, definitely. And I think that our biggest problem is the idea of seeking permission. And that's what I always try to be a good boy when I was a little kid. Make sure you get permission. Don't break the rules. Blah, blah. But then I looked at all these other dudes who didn't seek any permission. They just kind of apologized later, right? And they were doing awesome. Yeah. I was like, dang, I'm going to be like that, because no one can really define success for you. It is totally
your own journey,
subjective to you. Don't get me wrong. Like if you want to have a #1 record on the Billboard charts, like that is something that, it's measurable, right? Yeah. But how you perceive your own progress, like how you feel about what you do is almost as important as what you do. Because there's plenty of people out there eating super healthy diets, exercising, whatever, but their mind is unhealthy.
Mind is everything. The mindset is the key.
So it doesn't matter, because I know some people out there who are very uneducated. They're very kind of laissez-faire, right? But they're like, yeah, I had a hot dog, but, I had a kombucha, so it evens out, eh? And I'm like, not exactly, but the deal is such that they are relaxed. So even though they may not have the healthiest bodies, they actually have a fairly relaxed, healthy mind state. And that's the thing. The way you feel about it is really important. That person is not having an anxiety attack about eating a hot dog. They're kind of just patting themselves on the back for drinking some kombucha, right? Whereas there could be somebody who's a marathon runner who chastises themselves because they felt like they ate too much carbs or some nonsense, right? It's the idea that you need to be able to understand yourself. And one of the biggest problems that we have is we're we're taught since childbirth, like since we're kids, to seek the approval of our parents, fit in with the society and all these things. Now, don't get me wrong. There is plenty to getting on with others. But in terms of self-actualization, self-realization, being the best you can, like be the best version of yourself you can, it has to come from an internal sense. It has to come from your gut, what you feel is right, what is not. Now, I know that you can't intuit your GST. You have to calculate it. You need an accountant. You need the numbers. You need the math. But when someone says to you, hey man, like, I really think this job would be good for you. It really suits you. And you look at it, you think, that's a boring ass job. I don't want to do that. That's not me. Like, that person doesn't know who I am. And what you don't know is maybe they're just trying to manipulate you. Or maybe they don't fully understand that inside you want to be a writer, or you want to be an artist, or you want to be a stockbroker or whatever. And they're telling you that you should be the manager at Officeworks. You're like, that's not me, G. Like, that's what? Yeah. Because perception is a funny thing. And how you understand yourself, how you perceive yourself is super key. So it doesn't matter what someone else tells you. As long as you have a good read on who you are, you'll be much harder to manipulate. You'll be much harder to be told what to do because you already know what you want.
Yeah, you need to be open and also be strong.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like that idea of learning, like I get it probably more from jiu-jitsu. You could roll with a white belt and they do something real funky that like, and you're like, whoa, you're a white belt. You just did something. Just because they're a white belt doesn't mean you can't learn from them. You can learn from anyone. But I guess what I'd say is like, I guess we're in slightly different positions. Even though we are all humans trying to live our lives, I actually will be turning 37 in about a month. So I'm pretty much at my halfway point if we look at life stats.
Halfway point.
You know what I mean? Like, who knows? Who knows how it goes, right? But let's just say what I expect of myself in the next 10 years is possibly very different to what you expect of yourselves in the next 10 years.
Okay.
Which is fine. That's cool. But, you know, you got to go there to come back.
Yeah.
Going there, coming back and knowing what I know now, I've changed my behavior. I'm not going to waste my money. I'm going to work my ass off. And even if I have to do some things that in the meantime don't fully agree with me, it's in the name of the bigger picture.
Yeah. Mate, go on.
No, I was going to say, like, I'm constantly thinking about where I am in 5 years because that really informs me today. It's not actually about where am I by Christmas. Sure, that's a good thought. It's not big enough. It's like, where's my family in 5 years? Where's my company in 5 years? Where's the society in 5 years? So then, okay, how does that look on 10, 20, 30 years? I mean, we can't read the future, but if we don't go through the process of pros and cons of our actions and consider the meaning of our lives, we will live meaningless lives.
And that's a big part of that player one mentality. All the things you're mentioning, adaptability, learning along the way, self-analysis, looking at where you can upgrade. That's a big part of it. Really happy with everything that you've said. Like, I think everyone's going to get so much value out of just hearing it and hearing it from another perspective, seeing how it's the same. They're all part of the same mindset, but it's just all about really trusting yourself, heading out there and starting that journey. Is there anything you wanted to say that you wanted to make sure you said on the podcast about maybe anything to do with business, Jugo, Bulletproof, BJJ?
Oh no, man! Like whatever, I can get on here and spruik that nonsense, but I don't know how contributory that is. I would just say, obviously appreciate you guys. You know what I mean? Like I've seen you guys since like a long time ago. And I appreciate you guys. You got a great energy, and I just like, I guess almost like childlike, playful energy. And I don't say it in any condescending way, but like you guys are like open. You come up to me, you hit me up at the Jugo stand. You're like, oh, what's this? What you doing? And then I see you guys at like Grappling Industries, and you're doing the Tiki Tribe thing. And like, I guess I see like little sound bites and pictures of you guys as individuals within your own journeys as martial artists, but then also now seeing you guys come together to make this thing, to cultivate your own philosophy, your own idea, and your own lens to share information with the world. It's really great, you know. And I mean, people talk about entrepreneurship, and that's cool because that's a cool word. But really, it's just about people working together to make the world better, you know, and make themselves better, because no one benefits from you being lesser, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely a problem in the Australian society, is the tall poppy syndrome. Like, oh, don't get ahead of yourself, you know, don't be too positive, or don't, you know, like, and that's kind of bullshit, right? Like, because does your family benefit by you being less successful? Does you know, does history benefit from you being less successful? No. And the cool thing is, you guys have collaborated. You're not competing, you're using your joint energies. And the power of two people working together is so much stronger than one individual trying to take on the world, you know? So even though you are both very strong individuals in your own way, you know, that's why I started Bulletproof for BJJ with Joey. I'm going to have to drop some truth right now. Joey actually came up with the idea for the brand Bulletproof for BJJ. And we were doing the same thing. I was doing grapple fitness, which is essentially half of Bulletproof. But I said to him, hey man, that's cool. That's a good brand. We're like individual rappers, and now we start a rap group together. Let's start doing collaboration work, you know, like Run the Jewels. I would say I'm Killer Mike, but whatever. But that's because I'm funnier. But anyway, like, we come together to make this thing, and our collaboration has been so much more powerful than us doing our individual thing and potentially competing and being like, I'm better. Because we're brothers, like we're tight mates. He makes up for my deficiencies. I make up for his deficiencies. We learn from each other. And we've been able to build a platform that enables us to share and help people, which is what we both want. Yeah. And what I look at and seeing you guys, and that's why I'm kind of stoked to be having this conversation with you, is I see what you're doing. And that's why I've been messaging and saying, hey man, get me on. Because I want you guys to also be able to just, like, not in a self-congratulatory kind of a way, but just appreciate that, provided that you can be accepting of each other long-term. And understand that sometimes someone lets you down and sometimes you let them down. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to work. You guys working together in this way, you will build something meaningful. And so all I want to say is, like, thank you to you guys for having me on. Appreciate this work that you're doing to be able to put out a positive and also, like, analytical and effective way of looking at the world. Because that's really what we need more of. And so just want to say thank you to you guys.
I really appreciate that, bro. And it's funny that it always affirms to me, like, everyone that always reacts positively to this kind of thing is always people that are happy with themselves and are out there pursuing something on their own and adding their own greatness and contributing their own bit to the world. So yeah, really appreciate it, bro. And everything you said has been fantastic on this podcast. People are going to get so much out of it. I myself am left with a bunch of gems here. Yeah. So that's good. I'm going to apply these and continue to move forward.
My pleasure.
Another player in the game. My man, JT. Thanks for having us, bro.
Take care,
Player
bro.
one. Thanks, boys.
That's it.
Ciao.